I'd like to invite our next speaker, Mr. Unupom Kausik, the president of Ncml. Anupam, if you can share your introductory views, please, and then we can then go on to our last speaker after you. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Rahul. It's good to speak after Rajesh and Vijay has spoken, because they have covered most of the grounds and left very limited ideas to speak about. But nonetheless, I'll contribute my bit to it. See, we need to look at this entire situation from a statistical lens. We all know the numbers that are being peddled around 17% of the GVA in terms of its participation in GDP, and supporting almost 50% of the population. But if we look at the gross capital formation, it has been anemic at around 2.3, 2.4% over last decade. And if we look at the market prices, it has been between 6 to 7%. So a GVA share of 17% supported by 2.4% of GCF is pretty pathetic. And the reason is very simple, that the private capital has not been able to make returns on that. And Rajesh would know that the kind of variability and the kind of risks that are fraught in this sector, because of the natural variability, because of the policy uncertainties, the policy variability, the global forces operating in this sphere. Nature, of course, is one unknown. Devil is always around the corner. So looking at these massive uncertainties, the private capital was never incentivized to commit, and if those who have invested in this sector has not been, I would say, blessed with the best of the outcomes. So what is the solution in that case? If we need to increase the share of GCF, at least to the ratio of what it has in the GVA, there has to be some incentivization for risk taking. And if we look at the history of last 3-4 decades in the sectors where the maximum GCF in comparison to their share of the GVA is any scale to go by, the best example comes to my mind is the IT sector. And if we look at what led to a creation of a massive IT sector, was prolonged tax breaks on the investment that were made in the sector. So when agriculture income is free, why can't this government create a situation or a policy enabling environment where any and every investment which increases the productivity, which increases the marketability, which increases the, I would say, the value creation paradigm, if it is made tax-free for next 10, 15, 20 years, we will not be looking at the financing institution. The private capital will come running. And when the agriculture income itself is not taxed, there is just some requirement of a policy tweaking to recognition of what constitutes to the farming income. Is it only the farm gate income, or one can encompass the entire value chain into the definition of farm income? And if we do this, that kind of a tweaking, the abundance of capital will address a lot of issues that Rajesh and Vijay has touched upon, and you addressed in your opening statements. Now, coming to the second component of this credit access, this is what I have just said is the creation of capital for long term. And unless we take it to at least 9 to 10%, I don't think this sector has a future in terms of able to support any growth that can emanate from these farm reforms. What these farm reforms are trying to address is to increase the productivity in the first place. Either it's the back-to-back agreements, the contract farming agreements, or the Essential Commodities Act amendment, which is basically signaling the large players to come and do an aggregation function, or the access to the farmer for reaching out anybody and anywhere in the country. So all these three things are primarily focused around increasing the productivity as well as increasing the production. Now, if you do that, you need to create complementary systems for aggregation as well as distribution. The last 5-6 decades, there are four examples of success in the agriculture, and we all know them by the names of Operation what we call Flood or White Revolution, or Operation Golden Revolution, which is horticulture, or we call it the Operation Golden Flow, which is the edible oil, which happened in mid 80s. So all these three or four steps, or even the Green Revolution, which is the cereals production and its increase. So all these 3-4 success examples have one common trait. these examples were built on a success of the triad, which is the production, aggregation, and distribution. You'd look at any of these and you will realize while the productivity was increased, it was supported by an equal complement for aggregation and then distribution onward. So unless and until a concerted effort on the basis of these four things is implemented across the value chain, the results would be suboptimal. Just to give you an example, there is hardly any policy enablement in the horticulture, but last 1.5 decades, the CAGR of horticulture has been 4.1% in productivity terms, from 185 million ton to 330 million ton, as compared to non-horticulture crops, which is only 2%. So without any government intervention, the market forces could drive 2x of the growth which has been witnessed in the non-horticulture, which is heavily policy regimented and MSP supported block. So my sense is that if you leave it to market, incentivize the market using the text tools, which are the most, and we have seen the world over, the text tools are the most efficient tools for inviting the access to capital and long-term capital. It's not going to be short-term capital. The returns are going to come over 5, 10, 15 years. It's a slow return industry. Any investment in agriculture intervention yields result in 3, 4, or 5 years. How many successful examples in the private sector in agriculture? Hardly any. I mean, if you look at the number of successful corporates, they're either in the agri input side or in the far end of production or the consumption side, which is alcohol or possibly a few sugar companies. So my sense is that if we need to create Cargills and ADMs and Bunges of India, there has to be a kind of a support which these kind of organizations got in early 20th century in US. The kind of policy enablement, the kind of facilitation in terms of access to capital, differential tax treatment, multiple things happened with these large corporations, not only in US or any geography where they have succeeded. So unless and until we get the similar treatment and a similar time horizon of what you call the flexibility to operate, the results would remain elusive. We have been operating in the warehousing space, and we know that the returns on warehousing is not to anybody's liking, unless and until you complement it with a whole set of services. And we all know from the experience of last 10, 15 years that if the investments have happened due to these lopsided policies, sometimes where the tax incentive, the interest subventions by NABARD or other banking institutions has resulted into a significant lopsided distribution of capacity, and which has hurt the return potential of a lot of existing investment. So what is happening? There is no common national blueprint of which kind of pockets or what areas require this kind of investments to flow in. Similar thing I can say about the access to credit, which is the collateral management or the collateral finances we keep talking about. There has been a significant decline in that entire sector because the banks who are doing, they did not know how to manage the price risk. Just to put it in perspective, the size of this collateral management market reached close to 60,000 crores in 15-16. Now it is down to less than 20,000 crores. What is the reason? Because the kind of risk that cropped up on their portfolios due to significant price erosion, that has taken away the appetite of the formal banking to engage with the agriculture credit. So we all know that managing price risk is not the cup of tea of the standard banking practices. You require specialized institutions to manage that, or you need to create a special enablement to manage, or the kind of NPA norms. The same NPA norms would not work as it works for many other assets, because these are price-based lending modules. So these price-based lending modules and assets where the price volatility is as high as probably 30% in a year, the margins get wiped out and the banks keep on carrying the bag of losses. And what happens that they do not come forward in subsequent years to offer the farm credit in the post-harvest phase. So we need to find out the ways to create alternate institutions or alternate structures to provide access to credit after the production has taken place. And there also, whom should it be provided to? Is the farmer is the right entity to seek that credit? I don't know, because having taken the production risk, you cannot expect a farmer to take price risk also by taking additional money borrowed on his small farm holding and then carry the price risk as well. So the sense here is that we need to aggregate not only volumes, but we need to aggregate the price risk also. And we need to find out institutions who can manage these price risk in collaboration with exchanges, with corporates. It has to be a multi-stakeholder collaboration, which can actually offer the sophisticated price risk management practices to this aggregation of volume and risk. So my sense is that if we look at from all three components, which is improving the production, providing the aggregation, and then enabling it with the distribution to not only the domestic consumers, but also to the international consumers. Just to put it in perspective, if India achieves in its commodity production the global averages, we will change the scales of the global S&D, and which can drop the prices by 30 to 40%. So we need to look at that, where will the additional production that if India ends up achieving, where it is going to end? It's going to end in some of the existing markets, and we are going to increase the price, start a price war. So we need to have a policy where we can access those markets on value-added differentiable basis, which brings into perspective the idea of food processing sector. So there has to be a policy support where long-term capital can come into creation of food processing facilities, primarily focused on export markets, supported by 10-15 years of income tax breaks like IT industry got, and it built a super solid gross capital, which continued the bonanza in the IT sector for 3-4 decades. So something of that sort has to be thought through if we need to see the real results of these reforms, and if we need to see the real solid global risk capital coming to take part into this. That's it from my side.